to my channel. It's True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays the stories that I like to bring to you. I'm also over on the TikTok, and it's Jess Rose 5472, or you could join my Patreon, which is patreon.com / Jess Rose 5472. Sorry, I've got myself all het up. I've just come back after a holiday and birthday and everything else. So I'm all ramped up, but I will calm down. But if you, I am live on a Tuesday and Thursday, but if you're watching this, it's because I also put them up at the weekend on my pre-recorded. That's probably what you're watching now. So as the title says, it's the Brutal Laken Riley Story. It is. I know it's a little bit controversial, this one. I'm not doing that. I mean, obviously it will have to be mentioned at some point. But this is just about this beautiful, beautiful girl. That's who I'm talking about. That's who the story is going to be about. So, okay, I'm going to start now. So, Laken Hope Riley, born on the 10th of January 2002 in Marietta, Georgia, in America. It's an American story, okay? Now, I've heard that Marietta is an absolutely beautiful place. I don't know it, obviously, but I've heard it's a beautiful place, lovely place to bring up your children, very family orientated, just beautiful scenery. I heard very, very positive things about this place, and that's where she was born. Her mum, Alison Phillips, her dad, Jason Riley, her stepdad is called John Phillips. Okay, so obviously her mum and dad did break up. She's got 3 siblings, Lauren, Kaylee, and Jackson. Okay, now I believe Kaylee, because her surname is Riley, I believe maybe that was within the first marriage, and then Lauren and Jackson, their surname is Phillips. So I'm thinking obviously that was second marriage, okay? But it is said that she's very, very, very close to Lauren, who was a younger sister, Lauren Phillips, okay? Now, Laken, everything I've seen about this girl just said she was just the sweetest girl, nicest family member, nicest friend, beautiful little thing. She really was just a petite little girl. Now, at high school, she went to River Ridge High School. And like I say, just a caring, kind-hearted, a friend would call her. Beautiful girl. Also, not only was she loved by her friends and family, she loved them. Very, very caring girl. She then went on to the University of Georgia, which she had recently changed up to date with the story I'm about to tell you, to a medical university called Augusta University in Athens, Georgia. Okay, she wanted to become a nurse, which it wasn't a surprise to anyone, because that's just who she was, just such a caring person. So it wasn't a surprise that that was the field she was going to go into. She also nannied for 2 young children. So she wasn't doing that though. She was running. She loved running. She'd compete in like mini marathons, and her standard run was like a 6-mile run. Fitness was just very important to her. Or she'd be singing and playing a guitar. She just a really all-round, motivated, really lovely girl. Also very religious, was looking forward to getting married and having her own little family. She kind of had a future very much mapped out, okay? Now, she was part of a sorority, which was called Alpha Chi Omega. I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that right. It says Alpha Chi, but I think it's Chi Omega. which she was an active member, part of that sorority. And at the point of the story we're going to come up to, she was sharing an apartment with 3 of her friends, called Connolly, Lily, and Sophia. Okay. All 4 girls, should I say, very, very close. Connolly was her running pal. They used to go running most times together around the complex, the campus, sorry, should I say. And as I said, like, she would jog 6 days a week. You know, she's very, very active. And it was usually with Connolly. All right. So that's just a little bit about Laken. And as I've said, I don't think I can emphasize enough just how kindly people would speak about this girl. And when you see her pictures and her videos and everything, really pretty, it just looks really sweet. That's what she looks like to me. Just a very sweet girl. So now we're going to come up to the 22nd of February 2024. Obviously, it's a very current story, all right? And it's 9 a.m, all right? Now, Laken, who at this point is age 22, all right, she's going for a jog on the south side of the campus. Now, remember I said she's at Augusta Medical University. And this is the south side of the campus, and it's called the UGA Mural Fields, okay? And it was a trail just behind the apartment that she shared with her 3 friends. It's where she would go every day, practically. Now, she would normally go jog with Connolly, as I've said, but on this particular day, Connolly had classes. Now, she'd got up that morning. She'd seen Laken in the kitchen area. They'd sat down, they'd had a chat and stuff. And then Connolly had left for her class. And then Laken got ready and she goes out for a jog. And like I say, this is at 9 a.m. Now, where she would run behind her apartment, this would lead to Oakney Forest Park, behind Lake Herrick, it's called. Now, what you get there, very picturesque area. You get joggers, dog walkers. It was that kind of place. Now, some of it where she would run would go into a little bit more secluded paths and trails. You could have the main trail and then there was little trails that would come off it. I have seen footage of these trails, and once you would come out of Ireland, yes, there would be trees either side. It would be quite secluded then, but she'd run these trails many, many, many times. So the fact that she'd gone on her own on that morning, she wasn't concerned by any means. She used to run with her phone. She'd have her AirPods in. She used to like to listen to music, or she'd phone her mum. And she also had her watch. Now, she used to have an Apple Watch. At this point, she had a new Garmin watch. And it's one of these watches that does everything, you know, tell you your heart rate, you can phone from it. It was like all singing, all dancing type watch. And this is what she had when she went out for this run. Now, at 9:03, it's just a couple of minutes, she calls her mum, okay? And I've looked everywhere, and maybe I'm just missing what I'm looking at. I don't know if she spoke to her mum very briefly at that time. Maybe it was a case of I'll call you back type deal. Or she called her mum and her mum didn't answer at that point. But it was a very quick time period, okay? And then at 9:11, all right, so it's just 8 minutes later, there's a call from Laken's phone to 911, all right? Now, I've heard that call. You don't hear much on the line. You can hear a voice say, okay, about 50 seconds in. It's the call's about a minute. And what you can hear is the operator saying, 911, what's your emergency? You know, the normal uh 911 reaction that you would get when you call. But of course there's no response. Okay, so they do call back, 911 do, at, no, this was at 9:11, they call back at 9:12 and 9:13, but there's no response, it just rings out. Okay, now Laken's mum, and this is what I was saying, I don't know if it was a case of she'd said I'll call you back, or she had a missed call from Laken when she'd called at 9:03. But her mum calls back at 9:24, 9:38 and 9:58 a.m. And these were a mixture of calls and texts. And by this point, Lauren was also texting Laken, because her mum, Alison, was obviously getting concerned now, and she'd spoken to Lauren. She's like, look, your sister's out jogging. I don't understand why she's not picking up. She was getting quite concerned, her mum was. I just thought the reaction time of this family and her friends was second to none. I have to say that. Now, Laken's roommates themselves, you remember I said Connolly had to go to class, but while she was in class, they had like a Find My Friends app between them. They were very on the ball, these girls. And she'd actually noticed that Laken was still out on this app, okay? But then all the signals went down for a lot of the phone providers around that period of time. So when the signal came back up, Connolly noticed she'd had a missed call from Lauren, which is obviously Laken's sister. And she was in class, but she called her back and just said, look, basically, I'm in class, what's going on? And Lauren's like, have you heard from Laken? We haven't heard from her. And I've heard Connolly speak, and she said, you know, she started to panic then, because she'd noticed that she hadn't heard from Laken, and she'd seen on the Find My Friends app she hadn't really moved from a certain area, and you know, they were all getting really, really concerned. So when they looked on the Find My Friends app, they saw that Laken was in a certain area just a couple of minutes onto the trail where they would normally run. So they'd been calling her, messaging her, there's no answer and anything else. So we get to 11:31 a.m. All right. So one of the friends, I believe now, I think Connolly hadn't come back, so it was Lily and Sophia. Lily had her dog, and Sophia, they head down to the trail because they can see that it's her app, the Find My Friends app is showing that she hasn't moved. She hasn't really moved from one particular area. And as they're walking down there at 11:46 a.m., so, you know, just 15 minutes later, sorry, they find a white earpod, okay? And they find it on the ground. And they're like, that's Laken's. So straight away, this is at 12:05 now a.m., they call 911. Okay, this is a friend, a family are advised, look, we can't find her, we found her AirPod. So everyone's like, what is going on? What's happening? What's going on? This is what I mean, they're all very involved, they're all very quick thinking friends and family. You know, it shows who she was as a person to have her friends have that reaction to trying to find her. Okay. So now we get to 12:05 p.m. Sorry. They've called 911. They, in that conversation, they say, look, the service providers were down, but hers wasn't. Laken's was on a different network. Her provider wasn't down. And you hear her say she's due in nursing class at 1 p.m. She never, ever, ever misses a class. We can't find her, but we have found her earpod down on the trail. We're really, really concerned. said she never misses a class, and her location hasn't moved for 3 hours now. I think it was almost 3 hours by that point. So it gets to 12:38, which is only 11 minutes. So this is 12:38 p.m. Okay, it's only 11 minutes after the police have arrived, and a detective, Kenneth Maxwell, he begins his search along. I don't know if he's a detective, actually, he might be an officer. And he begins a search to see if he can find the area where it's shown where Laken hasn't moved for a couple of hours. And very, very quickly he sees Laken, and you can hear, you don't see the footage, obviously, I presume it was shown, but we don't see, but you can hear him, and he's calling out to Laken, okay? And obviously she's not responding. And when he gets close, she's lying on the ground, partly covered by branches and leaves. Like I say, called out to her, had received no response. And Laken, he calls his team in, and Laken she's declared dead at the scene. Oh, this poor girl. She'd just gone for a jog. That's it. She'd just gone for a jog. Now, the 911 call that I'd mentioned, it had come from her. It was like an SOS call, I believe, from her watch. Okay. And they believe that when the 911 call was made at 9:11, that was when something had gone very badly wrong, and obviously she couldn't talk. So the policeman, you can hear his voice break as he'd gone up to her, when obviously she wasn't responding. It was just a very, very upsetting time. It had been a very, very, very long time since something like that had happened on that campus. So it was like a real shock to everybody. Okay. Now, like I say, she was declared dead at the scene. She had obvious blunt force trauma to her head. And her death was declared a suspected homicide there and then. Okay. And what's really heartbreaking is her watch, the Garmin watch that I mentioned that follows your heart rate and everything else. It showed that her heart had stopped at 9:28 a.m. So when her mum had been phoning her, something was obviously happening to Laken. Okay. There was also a rock that was found quite nearby that had blood on it. Little bit where the phone had pinged. The police were looking around. It was a bit further away from Laken, but they found her phone, which did have an obvious thumbprint on it. Okay, so they're like, is that hers? Is that someone else's? So they're just straight away, they want to know what's going on. Of course they do. Her friends and her family were all notified straight away. I've seen the footage of when her mum, and I believe it's her stepdad, are notified. I think the other girl with them could be Lauren, her sister. And oh, it's awful. It's awful to watch that happen, because you see in real time when they find out that she's been found and she's deceased. It's absolutely, it's just heart-wrenching to watch that video. But very quickly, witnesses come forward, okay, say that they'd seen a man around that area. And don't forget, this is a university campus. It's a very nice area. And anyone who looks out of place is going to stand out like a sore thumb. And this witness who came forward said, look, there was this guy. He had on a navy blue jacket, black gloves, a hood and a cap. Okay. And he just stood out. He didn't look like a jogger. He obviously didn't have a dog, so he wasn't dog walking. And he just looked creepy. This witness said that she'd seen him when she was jogging down by the lake that I'd mentioned. And he was just staring out into the lake, kind of looking at his phone and staring out. She said it was just very odd. She couldn't put a finger on it, but it was very odd. So she, you know, gave that description to the police. Other people came forward, said, yeah, I saw someone today who was looking a bit dodgy. You know, but you can't just assume someone's up to no good just because they don't look like they fit in an area. So, you know, at first I was like, well, why didn't you report it? Like, there's some dodgy guy hanging about, but you can't do that, I suppose. So, but they came forward very quickly to the police to give this description. So the detectives started looking at CCTV footage from around the campus. Now, I've seen some of the CCTV posts, and there's a lot of areas that aren't covered, including the area where Laken was found. Okay, but they start to look at the areas they can see and just see if they can see this guy that's been described to them. And what they see is at 6:52 a.m. that morning, so the 22nd of February 24, by the campus bus stop. Okay, you can see all of this online. It's all quite nearby. The areas are all, you know, they're not far from each other. And there's like a campus bus stop. And wearing the clothes that the witness described, this navy blue jacket, black gloves, a cap with a hood over him, you see this guy kind of pacing around by the bus stop, and he's got like a white cup in his hand, and he's just kind of walking up and down on the grass verge, and then he's coming back. Doesn't seem to know what to do with himself, and looks very odd. What he's also got on as well is like a grey sling bag. He's got that on as well. Now, this was by an apartment complex. Now, remember I says that you've got the campus bus stop and the campus sort of goes round. Well, just behind there, you've got some train tracks and you've got an apartment complex. Okay. Now, this is on the other side of the campus, and it's called Azulike Complex. I know I'm going to pronounce it right. So Azulike Complex, all right? Now, this complex was about a mile from where Laken had been found, okay? So they're like, let's have a look around this complex. Let's see what's going on here. So it shows at 6:59 a.m., so just 7 minutes after that footage of him at the bus stop was seen, you see this same man coming along an apartment building, but not the Azula-like complex. I'm pronouncing that right at all. It's a student complex, and you see him come round on the ground floor outside, and you see him trying the door of one of these apartments. And then you see him sort of go away, and then you see him come back again, try this door, see him go away. This goes on for nearly an hour of this guy coming back and forth. Does it about 5 times. Very creepy. And you're just like, oh my God, is there someone in there? Well, yes, there was. There was a young girl who was showering at that time. Now, I don't know if she'd been pottering around and had missed certain parts when he pulled the door and he'd left, and then she came into view. But at that point, she was in the shower, and at this time, it was 7:57 a.m. So we're talking nearly an hour by then that he's been constantly trying this door, and you can see this on the CCTV. She wouldn't, from inside the apartment, wouldn't have been aware of it, so it's frightening. And as she gets out the shower, she hears the door rattle. And she kind of shouts, so, hello, or excuse me, something like that. Sees a guy through the window looking in back at her. And straight away, she jumps on the phone to the police. And at that point, he must have heard her and he's ran. And you hear the phone call of her on the phone to the police, basically saying, you know, it was really weird. I was in the shower. There's someone looking through the door. Police come out, but by that point, he's long gone. You know, they can't really. They just tell her to be careful, I suppose. You know, and it's a real shame, because this is an hour before Laken leaves to go for her run. It's very sad. Now it shows at 9:05 a.m. because don't forget they're looking through CCTV. They then find at 9:05 a.m. they see Laken running. You can see that on or everything I'm telling you where I've mentioned the CCTV footage. You can see this online. It's very sad. You can see her running. See her phone in her hand. She's just doing what millions of people do. Just going for a jog in the morning, minding her business. Like I say, then at 9:11, so 6 minutes later, she calls 911. Now, on that 911 call that was made, remember I said it goes on for about a minute. You do vaguely, it's very vague, but you hear a male voice say, okay. Now, I've been told I hear it. So, of course, I hear it. But before I'd heard that was said in that message, I didn't hear it. So I don't know if I'm hearing okay because I've been told that that's what's said in the message, because you don't really hear a lot. I will say that. Now, the autopsy was then done on Laken, okay? And it showed that she died of blunt force trauma and asphyxiation, all right? She had 8 injuries to the left side of her skull, and injury to above her right temple. Said that one of these had caused her brain to bleed as well. So the cause of death was put down to both the blunt force trauma and the asphyxiation. All right. Now, news of Laken's death had gone nationwide by the end of the day. By the end of the 22nd of February, nationwide, okay? Now, on that evening, all right, on the evening of the 22nd, a police officer, I mean, these police officers, I've got to admit, they were on the ball. They really were. You know, this is a crime channel. You know, I've done a story a couple of weeks ago where a young girl was missing for a year before anyone even decided to ask where she was, you know, and this was a child, you know, so how quick this police force got their act together, you know, the FBI were involved. It was a whole big thing. I just think it was amazing for the family that, you know, they weren't kept hanging on. So like I say, this police officer was searching dumpsters around the area, and it was around the Azulik like complex, okay, apartment complex, and he was looking through a particular dumpster, and he finds, remember I mentioned a jacket, remember that jacket I mentioned? He finds this jacket in a dumpster, and he's looking, and he believes he can see blood stains on this jacket. He gets it out. Not only is there blood stains on the jacket, around one of the buttons there's hair, quite a bit of hair, dark hair, wrapped around it, okay, around this button. Now, what he wanted to do was he's looking around and he can see that there is a home that's got a Ring doorbell that's kind of facing on to this dumpster. So he knocks on and asks, you know, can I look at your Ring doorbell footage? And when he watches this footage from earlier on that day, at 9:43 a.m., who does he see? Same guy. Same guy he's been seeing all day, that the witness had described to a T. All right. Now, he's also wearing, at that point, that black Adidas cap that I mentioned that had been under a hood. Okay. They also saw him on the camera dumping something in a bush. Okay. So they go to that bush where they saw him dumping something. And they find a pair of black bloody gloves with a ripped thumb in the glove. Now, if you remember when I said they found Laken's phone, there was a thumbprint on the phone. Now, that thumbprint wasn't Laken's. And now they've got gloves where there's a rip in the thumb of the glove. And they're like, right, okay, we need to find this guy, right? So when they test the jacket, the blood and the hair was Laken's. And some of the hair, quite a lot of the hair had been ripped straight out of her head. Oh, it's so sad. But they need to know who this guy is, so they put on a bolo alert, which is a be on the lookout alert, along with a picture, which was a still of the CCTV footage they got. It was a very clear picture, and they put that out. All right. Tips started to come in very, very quickly, really, really quickly. And the name that kept on flagging up was Jose Antonio Ibarra. All right. Nickname Victor, but his name's Jose. Now, Jose was a 26-year-old man from Venezuela. All right. He'd arrived in the US in September of 2022. He'd gained entrance illegally through the southern border. He was initially apprehended, but then he got released into the country. He was sent to New York, and he was staying at the Roosevelt Migrant Center in New York initially. But after his brother called him, who was also in the country, I believe illegally, allegedly, his brother called him and said, look, there's work down here in Georgia, come down here. So he was like, oh, okay. So he headed down there. I believe he got a float on the taxpayer's money, because he needed the help. I believe, I haven't worded that right, but I believe that's how he got the plane down there. Now, these two, Jose and his brother, I believe his brother's name's Diego, yeah, they were gang members of a Venezuelan gang, okay? Now, it showed in September of 2023, before he moved down to Georgia, Jose had been arrested in New York for acting in a manner to injure a child. And what it was, he was on a bike with a 5-year-old lad on the front or the back. Neither one had a helmet on. So he was arrested for that, but he was released, okay? And then in October of 2023, now he's down in Georgia, him and his brother get arrested for possessing stolen goods from Walmart, apparently. Again, both released. Then in December of 2023, it's just a couple of months before Laken is murdered, Jose was supposed to go for he was supposed to appear in court, and he didn't. And it seems that I struck the ball at that point, and he wasn't picked up. Okay. So on the 23rd of February 2024, so this is the next day, and it's about 5 to 3 in the afternoon. The police go to the apartment Jose is stopping at with his brother, Diego. You see the footage. He is asleep. You know, he's kind of just getting up, and they realise quite quickly that Jose or his brother can't speak English. Okay. So they have to get an officer who can speak Spanish and who can translate. So it's a whole long-winded thing, but eventually, you know, they start to have these conversations with him. And then, but while they're waiting for this translator, they notice that Jose has got a lot of scratches on him. He's got fresh marks on and scratches on his neck and his arms and his hands. And but when the translator comes and he's asked about these, he said from the heat. And then he goes, oh, they're just scratches. And you can see them online, quite deep scratches. So they're just like, no. And Jose is arrested there, and then he's arrested on suspicion of murder. Okay. Now, this, as I mentioned at the beginning, it did become a huge political issue. It did. It was in an election year. It was, you know, the Republican side of the government, their main focus was on illegal immigration anyway. So when this happened, of course, it was a firestorm. It just blew up. Especially the fact, obviously, he was illegal. They'd actually had him 2 or 3 times, and he was let go. So it's not like he'd snuck into the country and just disappeared. They'd had him a few times. So yes, it became a whole big political issue. Something I do understand. I do, but that's not what I'm talking about in this story. This is about Laken, and I just wanted to mention because it was a big thing. But it's not what the sole purpose of this story is about at all, by a long shot. Okay. Now, Laken's funeral was held on the 1st of March 2024. Very quickly, it was only a week later, and this was at Woodstock City Church. And because of the political climate at the time, the family just wanted it completely private. Okay. A memorial was set up at Lake Herrick, the lake that little Laken had been running along. And I have seen where they've actually written, where it says lake, they've put an N on the end so it does say Laken, you know, which is very fitting. On the 7th of March 2024, the House of Representatives put forward, they signed in the Laken Riley Act, which was to mandate federal detention of illegal immigrants who commit burglary or theft. It was then waiting for the Senate to pass it. The Senate passed it, and then President Trump, passed it into law on the 29th of January 2025. Just a note, there was only 12 Democrats in the Senate that agreed with that. Just throwing it out there. Now Jose, he was obviously charged with Laken's murder, and he faced 10 charges, 3 for felony murder, malice murder, false imprisonment, kidnapping, aggravated assault with intent to rape, hindering a 911 call, concealing the death of another, and peeping Tom. I'm assuming the peeping Tom was for trying to break into that girl's house. Now, he pled not guilty. Audacity. Pled not guilty. But he wanted a bench trial. So just the judge to judge the trial. Oh God, Jessica. Rather than having a jury of his peers. I don't know. I think his defence might have encouraged him to do that, basically saying he wouldn't get a fair trial. Like I say, this wasn't just nationwide. This had hit over here by this point. This had gone worldwide by this point. It was huge. So that was what had been agreed. Now, on the 15th of November 2024, the trial went ahead. All right. Now, the prosecution, when they basically went back to the 22nd of February 2024, describing what had happened to Laken. Basically, although it's only him that could ever say what actually happened, they believed that obviously she'd ran where you see her on the CCTV footage running along the path, and then she turns a lot onto the trail. When she goes out of sight, if you remember, I mentioned the CCTV footage doesn't cover that area. They believe that he blocked her path. And it was at that point, when her path was blocked, she'd pressed the SOS button on her phone or her watch to call the police. But when he'd seen this, he'd obviously grabbed her. They believe it was a sexual attack that had gone wrong, because she wasn't going for it. She fought against him, and it said that he perhaps tried to lift her top, and that's how she'd become wrapped in it. That's what had caused the asphyxiation. He then either dragged her or made her walk, because then she was found obviously off the path, wasn't she? So they don't know if he dragged her or he'd forced her into that area, but she fought him for everything she had. The injuries on him show that. And so then he picked up the rock, and that's what he'd murdered her with. Now, the white cup that I'd mentioned on the CCTV footage, turns out that was alcohol in there, so he'd been drinking from very early on. There was his DNA under Laken's fingernails. So you might be like, all right, he's got these marks on him, but how do you connect it? Because his DNA was under her fingernails. She basically, through the fight that she put up, she got it, you know. The family, though, during the trial did have to leave more than once, especially when the medical examiner came up and, you know, was talking about the autopsy, etc. It was absolutely heartbreaking for them, as you can imagine. You know, I can't imagine. I don't think we can imagine. You know, it's just way too out of the realms of what you can think of to understand what they're going through. Now, the trial itself only lasted for 4 days. And on the 19th of November 2024, he was found guilty. Jose was found guilty, of course. And he was given life with no parole. Never see the light of day again. You know, he was found guilty on all charges. Now that obviously it's no real comfort, is it? I mean, all right, you know, there's been justice found for her, but I just don't know how you get your head around something like that your child was just out running. She was doing so well, and she was doing everything right. You know, they'd go out in pairs, and, you know, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was a safe place supposedly, and, you know, and then you've got this university campus, and this, like I say, this very safe area, and then just across these train tracks, they're housing illegal immigrants who come from a very, they come from a very different place. Okay. And yeah, I don't want to get into it. I'm not getting into it, and I said I wouldn't, but yeah, it's very, very, it's you can't help but get angry. You just can't. Now, Laken's pastor did say he'd said some words about Laken. He'd said she was a loving daughter, sister, and friend, and she had a gift for making anyone she was around feel comfortable and seen, which I think just sums up everything I've found out about her. She just seemed like just a really sweet girl, and it's such a waste. Now the family have put together, have started the Laken Hope Riley Foundation. So it's new. They've not long. It's not obviously not long been set up, but it's one of these cases again where I'm like, I have to give it to how strong these families can be to have anything left in them to be able to do that. But her stepdad did say, we have to do this for her. We have to, and I understand that. Because it'd be easy to just go into a hole and under a rock and never come out again. But you don't want your child just to be forgotten like that. So I understand where they're coming from. And yeah, just an awful case. I obviously followed it when it happened. I just thought, just such a shame, especially when we know he'd been arrested a few times and just let go, and just very, very, very sad. But I knew I wanted to do the story once the trial had been done and dusted and everything. So that was the Brutal Laken Riley story. Oh God, just trying to word it as well. Because I said, and I'm still sticking to it. I don't want to get into the controversial side of it, the political side of it, or anything else. I really don't, because it takes away from what this girl went through, but I do like the fact that President Trump did sign that bill in, and pass that into law, Laken's law. So I do, I'm happy about that. I'm glad that's been managed to be done. Like the Laken Riley Act. Sorry, what am I talking about? Laken Riley Act. But yeah, I've got myself all flustered in trying not to come across losing my temper. But thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays the stories that I like to bring to you. And yeah, if you'd like to subscribe, I'd really appreciate that too. But thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you soon. Thank you. How we doing, guys?